David Bowie might be a name you've heard often in the media, especially following his death earlier this year. But just hearing his name might have left you wondering, who was David Bowie anyway? Well, you might actually know him better than you think. David Bowie was a musical icon who paved the way for a new area in music in the 1970s. Today I'll take you on a tour of some of the most substantial moments in David Bowie's career. Bowie continues to be a consistent influence in modern-day pop culture. As someone who grew up performing to several of his songs and dance recitals, I became familiar with his music at a young age. And to help you recognize David Bowie, we'll explore his early career, his explosion into mainstream, and his continuing influence in pop culture. David Bowie was born in 1947 as David Jones, but changed his name to David Bowie in 1966. His early career was a time of musical exploration as he tried to navigate his way to stardom. By the age of 16, he was already performing in 3 different bands, and by 1969, it looked like he had finally made it with the release of his single, Space Oddity. The song release coincided with the United States moon landing and featured the lyrics "Ground Control to Major Tom." These lyrics might sound familiar, and in fact, when I pose a question to my audience, what made David Bowie stand out in the music industry and how was his individuality received? One student mentioned that Space Oddity opened the door for David Bowie's musical career. Though the song did receive a lot of publicity during the moon landing, it gained more momentum in Europe than it did in the United States. It wasn't until 1972, when Space Oddity was re-released, that it actually made it onto the Billboard, but it didn't even make it to the top 10. Both student responses to my question pointed towards society failing to accept Bowie because of the elaborate style and visual art he portrayed in his musical performances. Most memorable is probably his Ziggy Stardust persona. Dressed in colorful and often revealing costumes, it became more apparent that Bowie was not one to conform to social norms. Gradually, this attitude set him apart from others and made him an artist to watch. After a few years as Ziggy Stardust, Bowie did tone down the extravagance of his costumes and eventually morphed into a genre he described as plastic soul. It was during this time, the year 1975, that the song Fame hit #1 in U.S. charts. In 1983, he delivered another #1 hit, Let's Dance, and David Bowie was finally being recognized for the talent he possessed. Other fan favorites you might have heard are Changes, Young Americans, Golden Years, and whether you've heard these songs on the radio at work or in your parents' cars, or if you're just a Bowie fan, it's pretty likely you've heard some of these catchy tunes. As a pop legend, David Bowie was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 and awarded the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2006. Over his lifetime, Bowie recorded a total of 26 albums, the last of which was released 2 days before his death on January 10th of this year. As amazing as his career was, it's surprising to find that he only had 2 #1 hits in the United States. This prompted another question I asked the audience. Do you think society would feel differently about Bowie's style and genre of music if he were just breaking out as an artist in current times? Bowie was a pioneer, the first to do what he did, and the responses I received were concurrent with the idea that he would have been more accepted in our time. It seems these days individuality is more celebrated rather than suppressed, but as one student mentioned, it's hard to say whether we would be as accepting of Bowie if someone like him hadn't come along beforehand and changed society's minds in the first place. It's clear that Bowie expanded the boundaries of musical performance, and his inspirations are apparent in pop culture around the world. Artists like Lady Gaga, Nicki Minaj, Calvin Harris, and Madonna are just a couple examples of where Bowie has inspired other artists to push the envelope. David Bowie's eccentric spirit continues to inspire artists even following his death. Through his early career, Bowie worked to develop a sound that would eventually catch the attention of music enthusiasts everywhere and contribute to the definition of modern pop culture. As David Bowie once said, "I suppose for me as an artist, it wasn't always just about expressing my work. I really wanted, more than anything else, to contribute in some way to the culture I was living in." I think we can conclude he exceeded his greatest expectations.